Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast. And today we're going to talk about the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And we're going to look at the tiers of players in this fantasy football tournament, which is a PPR with a tight end premium. Tight ends get 1.5 points per reception. We're going to see what that does to the tiers and how varied players are in a single tier as to where they're going on the draft board. So definitely want to check it out, especially if you're in the FFPC league. Let's go ahead and do.
Listen up. It's time for the Fantasy Maverick podcast, starring the guy who's going to help you win that fantasy championship, Jimmy Maverick.
Hello there, friends. It's Jimmy Maverick. Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Maverick podcast coming at you from Santa Fe, New Mexico. And hey, before I begin, if you could please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share this with your friends, and of course, subscribe. All those things help me out in increasing the visibility of my channel, and I do very much appreciate it. Now, as I have mentioned in previous episodes, I am doing some high-stakes tournament leagues in the Fantasy Football Players Championship, which I'm very excited about. I actually just found out my second league filled, and I get the third pick in that draft. So I got the first pick in one and the third pick in the other. Very nice for achieving myself a super elite player in both those leagues, which I think is pretty cool. But what I wanted to talk about today is specifically the tier rankings for the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Now, this is a PPR league with a tight end premium. So the tight ends get 1.5 points per reception, and because of that, that greatly increases the value of the tight ends, and it also changes where they're being drafted as opposed to typical drafts. It moves all the players up about a round to 2 rounds from where you would expect to get them in a regular fantasy football league. It's also a 20-round draft, so people are drafting very deep into the list. The top 240 players come off the board. The rest go on to waivers, and you can pick up waivers during the course of the season. But specifically, let's talk about the tiers. Now, I'm not a huge fan of tiers. I don't like it because the first thing is they do separate tiers for separate positions. And for me, that makes it very difficult. So is a tier 1 receiver equivalent to a tier 1 running back? How about a tier 4 tight end versus a tier 4 wide receiver? Chances are they're totally separate. So what I've decided to do is just based on their projected value for the fantasy football championship here, I'm combining those 3 positions. So the running back, the wide receiver, and the tight end into tiers where all the players in a single tier earn about the same amount of points. And the threshold I put was 1 point per week. So basically, if we look at the tier 5 players, everybody in the tier 5 is going to earn about, from the best player to the worst player, about 1 point a week. The best player will get 1 point more per week than the lowest player. And then when you look between tiers, you can basically assume that it's about a point every time you drop a tier, point per week. So if we're looking at tier 5 players, you can expect that those players are going to earn about 5 points per week less than the tier 1. So I hope that's clear. We're going to talk about it. And the other thing I don't like about tiers is that they just put these 5 players in a row on the player list are all in the same tier. And I think I'm going to show you here that that is not the case, that there is great variance between where these players are being picked. And again, it's a reason why I don't use tiers. The value as well is only just one component that I look at when I'm evaluating players. It's the V and the VORC score. It's about 30% of their overall score. And so, this is just looking at one aspect. There's other things that might keep me from taking a tier 5 player versus a tier 6 who rates much better in those in other aspects, makes me more comfortable with taking them because I consider the tier 5 guy a higher risk. But let's get into it. So it starts out very easy. There is one tier 1 player in the league this season, and that would be Christian McCaffrey. And I've already talked about this, that Christian McCaffrey is a step and a level above every other player in fantasy football. His advantage is nearly 2 points per week over the number 2 player. So it's a substantial advantage to your fantasy team to take CMC with your first overall pick. And I do have him rated very well. I actually do have Dalvin Cook ranked just slightly ahead of him. But that's based on other factors. It's so, I mean, one of the big things is CMC's playing with a new quarterback this year. And so, whereas Cook still has Kirk Cousins. So because of those things, the Vork score is a little bit higher for Cook than it is for CMC, but I think they're both great. And of course, the value advantage you get from CMC is fantastic. You're just not going to beat it. No one else is going to beat it. So he's the tier 1, projected 346 fantasy points, first overall pick. And when you look at tier 2, you're going to understand why this is such an advantage. So tier 2 consists of 2 players, and it's actually in this league, they're the next 2 players to come off the board, but it's Travis Kelce and Dalvin Cook. Both these guys are projected to get about 312 fantasy points each. And so you can just see right there that there is a huge gap between the amount of points that those guys are going to earn and CMC. But still, there's nobody else that's going to score this many points. And when we drop to the next tier, all these guys are going to get about, I was thinking about maybe keeping these guys in the same tier, but I figure Kelce and Cook have at least a half-point advantage per week over anybody in tier 3. So who is tier 3? Tier 3 consists of 5 players, and they are Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, Saquon Barkley, Tyreek Hill, and Alvin Kamara. All these guys are projected to get about 300 points or more, 300 fantasy points or more. They're all first-round players except for Barkley, who has slipped to pick number 13 on the draft boards for the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and I can see why. Right now, this is assuming that Barkley's going to play all 17 games. But right now, there is musings and talk that he's going to miss the first couple games. If he does that, I'm going to have to downgrade his stats. I'm going to have to take maybe about 10% away from his stats. That's going to drop him significantly in tiers, as you will soon see. And for me, Barkley is the riskiest tier 3 player you can pick. But I think this also gives you a good idea for those of you that are picking mid or late in the first round. These are the guys you should be focusing on. These are the guys that are going to give you at least 1 point per week more than anybody in tier 4 or tier 5. And you're actually going to see that there is a first round player that is actually tier 6. Terrible, terrible choice. Do not take that player. We will get to him in a moment. So that's the tier 3. Now, tier 4 is the first tier that goes between the first round and the second round. So the 3 players in this round would be Darren Waller, DeAndre Hopkins, and Calvin Ridley. Hopkins and Ridley are both second-round players. Waller is going around 8th or 9th in most of these drafts. Again, PPR, the tight end premium makes him worth a lot. 291 points is what we're projecting for Waller, 280 for Hopkins, 276 for Ridley. So again, we're about 1 point per week behind those tier 3 players. But there is situations here where if you are picking late, you can get yourself a tier 3 guy and a tier 4 guy with your first 2 picks. That's substantial. That is really, really good. You go ahead and you get yourself Devontae Adams and you follow it up by getting either Hopkins or Ridley. You are going to be in really good shape point-wise over any running backs you could select during that time. So it's an important strategy to consider, because now we're going to drop to tier 5. Again, another 1 point per week advantage that tier 4 has over tier 5. And we also start to spread out now, because in tier 5, we have first round through third round players. So tier 5 consists of Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, George Kittle, DK Metcalf, Zeke Elliott, Aaron Jones, Keenan Allen, Najee Harris, Justin Jefferson, Austin Eckler, and Terry McLaurin. Now, on this list, we have 2 first-round players in Tier 5. Think about the serious disadvantage you're giving yourself by taking one of these 2 guys, either Henry or Eckler, versus taking someone like Ridley or Hopkins when you had the chance, or even Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs or Devontae Adams. You're kneecapping your team. And when you look at the points on this round, we're talking somewhere between 254 to 271 fantasy points scored during the fantasy season. But on the flip side, you've got some really good value players available late. You've got third-round players like Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin on this board. So you could conceivably, especially if you're like one of the early picks and you don't get another pick till late in the second round, but you get an early third-round pick, you could get yourself, your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 player, and then get 2 tier 5 players, because you could then take, you could take Metcalf in the second and then Keenan Allen in the third, and you are rocking a seriously tough team if you are picking early. And that's kind of what I'm looking at right now with these players. So that's tier 5. Now moving on to tier 6. Again, we're dropping another 1 point a week. And these players range from the first round to the fourth round. And we're talking players that are projected right now to get between 234 and 251 fantasy points during this season. So the worst choice of this group is another first-round player. Again, I can't imagine sacrificing my tier 3 player to get myself a tier 6 player in the first round, but Jonathan Taylor only projects right now at 244 points. They don't have a quarterback. Yes, it is a very good offensive line, but if they can't have any serious passing threat, which they really don't have anyway, they're just going to stack the box. They're going to stuff Taylor. And so I think Taylor is actually probably the worst choice of the first-round players, because he is so substantially worse than everyone else in this league. Remember, this is PPR with tight end premium. If we were talking about a standard league, these guys, Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, would rate a little bit better. Actually, I think Eckler would rate a little worse, but definitely Henry and definitely Taylor will rate much better in a standard points league or a half point PPR. It's just because of the point schedule. And this is and all I'm doing here is I'm just taking their projected stats and I'm multiplying it by the league point schedule. That's all it is. This is straight out of my app. You can go look at what projections I have for this player to see if I'm really being unreasonably low. I don't think I am, but this is something you need to consider. And in the tier 6, again, you've got players from the first round to the fourth round in this group. This group consists of Nick Chubb, CeeDee Lamb, Robert Woods, Antonio Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Allen Robinson, Jonathan Taylor we just talked about, Swift, we got Mike Evans, we got TJ Hawkinson, Cooper Kupp, Mark Andrews, and Joe Mixon. All these guys are tier 6. Now, the best players in this group are the ones you can get in the fourth round, and that would be Cooper Kupp and Mark Andrews. Both those guys, absolutely a fantastic target for your fourth overall pick. One is a mid-fourth round. The other one is towards the end of the fourth round. Actually, I'd say they're both mid. They're both mid-fourth round. They're not really late. But again, the advantage is you get at least 1 point per week more than what you get from the tier 7 players. Now, the tier 7, we kind of what happens is this group of players scores between 217 and 233 fantasy points. That's what they're projected. And you can get these players anywhere from the third round to the sixth round. So I hope you see what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to show you that there are, you want to look for the high value players at each round, because the fact that you can get a sixth round player and get them with tier 7 value is fantastic. Getting a third round player with tier 7 value, not great. And for me, the worst player in this round, as far as the third round, well, you got a couple that are very risky. You got Kyle Pitts, you've got Chris Carson, you've got J.K. Dobbins, you've got Montgomery. Those guys are all third-round players that only rate as tier 7. I mean, why would you do that to yourself? grab yourself the tier 6 players when you can in the third round, or even if you got those tier 5 players available. If Allen or McLaurin is sitting on your draft board, you absolutely need to take them over any one of those players I just mentioned, just because you're going to have at least 2 point per week advantage over what that other player would have. So let's just go through the whole list here. Here's the whole list of tier 7 players. You got Kyle Pitts, DJ Moore, Kenny Golladay, Chris Carson, Godwin, Cooper, Lockett, J.K. Dobbins, Julio Jones, Robbie Anderson, Myles Gaskin, Sanders, Montgomery, Jacobs, Thielen, and Higgins. So again, all these players projected to get between 217 and 233 fantasy points. And I've already told you the worst. The best players in this round are right now Robbie Anderson and Kenny Golladay. Now, Kenny Golladay is a player I was starting to talk myself into. I was like, oh yeah, I think I'm definitely going to have to get Golladay because he offers such tremendous value where he's going in the 6th round. But then what does he do? He pulls a hamstring. Oh man, hamstrings are the worst. It's that lingering injury that can really hobble him. And so really I got to take Golladay off. Golladay has the injury designation right now. He is off my list as far as players that I'm targeting. When would I consider him? When I see him as a full participant back in either practice or the preseason before these drafts happen. So I'm just staying clear of Golladay. But Robbie Anderson is a guy that I have been very big on this year. He is going right towards the end of the 6th round. So he's an easy get in the 6th. And again, offers fantastic value. Those are the best value players in this round. You've also got some nice 5th round players. You've got Tyler Lockett, whose consistency is terrible. But you've got Josh Jacobs, who's a guy that I'm very, very interested in the 4th or late 4th, early 5th round. You've got Adam Thielen, who does have a little bit of concern for me because of regression risk. But you also got T. Higgins. And T. Higgins, Josh Jacobs, Robbie Anderson, those are all guys that I'm targeting in just about every draft I have right now. So they're all fantastic choices. Great to get tier 7 value in the 5th and 6th round. That's what you want. So that's where we're at. Now, the next round, tier 8, these are all players that range between 200 and 216 points. These players are available between the 4th round and the 9th round, and they consist of the following players. We got Brandon Cooks, Chase Claypool, Jamar Chase, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cortland Sutton, Laviska Shenault, Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, Curtis Samuel, Travis Etienne, Tyler Boyd, Logan Thomas, DJ Chark, Jerry Jeudy, and Chase Edmonds. Now, of this group, the worst players for you to get are players like Jamar Chase, Travis Etienne, because they are both 4th round players, and this is a tier 8. I just can't imagine wanting to handicap your team by taking those players. And even though I like Etienne, I really like the upside of him, and I was targeting him earlier, but then this past week I was just kind of re-examining my projections. I adjusted his projections slightly. His value fell by about a round and a half from where it had been. It had been like in the top 50, like 49th, but now he's kind of in the mid 60s for value. So again, he's kind of fallen off my list because of that value hit that he took. And now, of course, finding himself in the tier 8 players. And again, those are kind of the worst players. But there's lots of great players you can get in the 8th round, and primarily the 7th round is where you're going to see this. Actually, I don't see any 8th round players in this group. It's actually 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 9th. Debo in the 9th. So, but for 7th round players, Brandon Cooks, Cortland Sutton, Laviska Shenault, Tyler Boyd, Logan Thomas, DJ Chark. All those guys are great options. DJ Chark is an end of the 7th, so you could find him available early 8th. Definitely take him. I mean, shoot, that is such a deal to get this tier level of players that late in the draft. It's kind of a no-brainer. So So there we go with tier 8. Let's move on to tier 9. And I'm only going to go through the first 11 tiers because basically after that, it gets a little bit squirrely and you're looking at mostly backups and handcuffs and stuff like that. So these are actually startable players. Do they have the ability to start for your team? Right now, everybody we're talking about is an every week starter. I mean, they're at least flex value. Tier 9, again, ranges from the 4th round, get this, to the 16th round. So there are some late round value players which are such screaming bargains. You gotta take them. I mean, I don't know how you could pass them up at this point. And even the one that is the 16th round player is, and really it's kind of interesting because in the FFPC, he's getting hammered right now. He's getting hammered down the draft boards. I think it's just because of the rumors about him getting cut. And I've talked about how he's acting like a player that wants to get cut. But I'm encouraged, and I expect him to rise back up again. I think he's going to rise back up from where he's at. Because right now he is at pick number 175. 16th round, Cole Beasley is a tier 9 player. And he is sitting in no man's land right now. An absolute amazing deal to take him there. But I would expect him to rise back up because they signed Josh Allen to that big new contract and they didn't cut him. So I think that risk is kind of past. And I'll tell you, man, when you get to that point in the draft, when you're in the 16th round of your draft, there's nobody. It's just like such horrible choices. There's no startable players. It is just a total dead zone. To get someone like Cole Beasley is a huge coup. Now, who exists in tier 9? And these are players that range between 183 and 199 fantasy points. So here's the list. Deebo Samuel, Devonta Smith, OBJ, Daryl Henderson, Jarvis Landry, Michael Gallup, Will Fuller, Dallas Goedert, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, Mike Davis, Cole Beasley, Michael Thomas, Kareem Hunt, Robert Tonyan, and Corey Davis. So again, the worst players that you can choose for your fantasy team are these tier 9 players in the 4th and 5th round. Who is the 4th round player? Well, I already told you it's Daryl Henderson, only projected to get 198 fantasy points. Not to mention the huge risk right now with them bringing in another running back. I would not be concerned at all if they bring in like Le'Veon Bell or one of those has-beens. That's not going to make me worry too much, but I think that they're going to trade for someone, I don't know, maybe James Robinson, maybe Kareem Hunt, someone like that, that other teams don't really need, and make a deal and get yourself a more solid. Because again, we're talking, they were expecting Cam Akers this year. There's no Cam Akers. Clearly Henderson is a step down from Akers, so they might try to bolster it. So he's a very, very high risk play, and he's a terrible value play. He sucks. 4th round, don't take a tier 9 player. We're talking you can get 4th round tier 6 players. That's 3 points per week additional you would give your fantasy team by avoiding someone like Daryl Henderson. And it's funny because Daryl Henderson was one of my primary targets when he was the backup. When he was the backup to Cam Akers. I'm very happy that I have him in those. I got him in some best ball leagues that I did, that I have him. He's great value because of where I got him, but no way will I take him now at where he's going. Also, you've got some 5th round players. Let me see here. You've got Mike Davis, another running back, and he is only projected to score 187 fantasy points going in the 5th round. Again, you could get yourself a tier 7 or a tier 8 player at that same point in the draft that's going to, again, make your team that much stronger. So very, very risky. Other late round players in this tier that you absolutely should target, we got Corey Davis in the 11th, and I think that's it. We got Marquise Brown in the 10th. So there are some great options here that when you get to those later rounds, when the pickings are very slim, that you could get someone with tier 9 value in those rounds is great for your fantasy team. All right, so we're almost done here. So we got 2 tiers left. These tiers are actually rather large. They just keep getting bigger every round. But tier 10 basically ranges from anywhere from the 5th round to the 13th round. And this is also the tier that ends the top 100 value players. So once we get past this tier, it's guys that are really not starters. They're not weekly starters, not even flex plays. They're guys that are going to sit on your bench. Situationally, they may be good. Matchup-wise, they may have good weeks, but they're not going to be anyone that you can start. These guys in this tier are very much like right on the cusp of that flex spot, maybe that second flex spot, right? But the tier 10 players range anywhere from 165 to 181 fantasy points, and it consists of the following. So we got Jalen Waddle, we got Antonio Brown, Mike Williams, Noah Fant, Javonte Williams. That's right. It's the Denver running back. Kenyon Drake, David Johnson, Henry Ruggs, Troutman, Gage, Gesicki, Hilton, Jones, Moore, Elijah Moore, James Conner, Jonnu Smith, Jalen Reagor, James Robinson, and Daryl Mooney, the Chicago receiver. Now, of this group, who's the worst choices? Well, it's those 5th round players. Javonte Williams. The dude is going to share time with Melvin Gordon. He's not going to be a workhorse, and his value just isn't great. Tier 10 in the 5th round, are you kidding? Why would you do that to your team? It just makes me crazy. And just the fact that you get Kenyon Drake in the 10th, and he's projected to do almost as well as Javonte Williams in the 5th. Why would you do that? But anyway, okay, so that's the 5th. I think he might be the only one. He is. He's the only 5th round player in this tier. And so just massive red flags for Javonte. Now keep in mind, I love Javonte for 2022. There's no way Melvin Gordon's going to get signed to an extension. He is gone after this season. But I don't think that Melvin Gordon's going to get cut. He may be another one of those trade candidates. Maybe the Rams make a play for him. And that if that happened, then clearly Javonte Williams' projections would go way up and his draft position would skyrocket as well, probably to the 2nd round. That's fine. I'm fine with that. But as of right now, with the situation that exists, he's not a great choice. Now, who are the best choices in this round? Well, I got to tell you, man, the best choice in this round, 13th round pick, would be Jalen Reagor, which is kind of interesting. I wasn't really expecting that, but he's projected with 165 fantasy points, and he clearly would be a great choice. When you're going for these late round dart throws, why not go for someone that is a marginal top 100 value pick? I don't believe his value is in the top 100. I think at that point you're out of the top 100. But to get someone like that in the 13th round, pick number 155 is absolutely a rock solid choice that has some upside there because it is his 2nd year. Who knows? Maybe he could do very well with Hurts. We don't know. But on top of him, you've also got T.Y. Hilton here. Now, T.Y. Hilton is a guy I don't really want because of his age, but the value, and also, you look at the other wide receivers on this team, there's not that much. There's not a lot of competition. And we're talking a guy, at this point, a marginal flex play based on matchups and everything else. So, as a 13th round pick, he's very, very low risk. Let's see here. We've got guys like Ruggs in the 12th. You've got Daryl Mooney in the 11th. Russell Gage in the 11th. All these guys, Jalen Waddle in the 10th. There's some really great options here. And again, to help build your depth and build the strength of your team, these are great guys to focus on in these middle rounds of this really long draft. You just got to get as many quality guys as you can. So the final tier we're going to do is tier 11. And again, these are guys that are 4s and 5s. I mean, they're really not startable assets. These are the best value bench plays you can get. Some situations are better than others. But the tier 11 players, again, it ranges from round 7 to round 18. So I really like the idea of getting these tier 11 players when we're talking the 18th, 17th, 15, those late round plays when you are just totally throwing darts. Why not go for one of these guys? And this is I think this is the largest group of players with a range in projected points from 145 to 162 fantasy points. We got players like Irv Smith, Jacoby Myers, McCole Hardman, Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, Deontay Harris, Eric Ebron, Rob Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette, Raheem Mostert, Brashad Perryman, Randall Cobb, Evan Ingram, Terrell Williams, Zach Moss, Randall Moore, Melvin Gordon, Tyler Higbee, Michael Pittman, Cole Kmet, Austin Hooper, A.J. Dillon, Paris Campbell, Anthony Ferkser, Ronald Jones, J.D. McKissick, and Jamal Williams. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot of players. But who are the worst ones? Well, you heard some names there. You're like going, what? That's a tier 11 player? Oh, yeah. Jones, from the tight end. I'm sorry. From Tampa Bay. Who else was on here that was just kind of shocking that it was just so bad? We've got some 7th round players like Raheem Mostert. Yeah, Mostert, tier 11. Don't waste a 7th round pick on a guy that you can't even reliably start. That's just what you don't want to do. But on the other end, you've got some late round guys here. Again, Brashad Perryman in the 18th round is projected to get you 154 fantasy points. It's not a startable value, but it's a guy that could be startable during the course of the year when you need him for bye weeks or whatever. Why not roster him with your 18th pick? Who else are you going to take in the 18th round? There's nobody. It's terrible. You take a defense or a kicker or something like that. By the way, don't even take a kicker till your last pick. Don't even bother. There's so many good kickers you'll be able to get at the end. And the one that I'm looking at, Mason Crosby. Nobody's drafting him, but Aaron Rodgers is back. This is a fantastic offense he's on. They're going to score points, and I'm going to say that they're going to regress on touchdowns, but guess what? They're going to increase. They're going to revert on field goals, which they didn't kick a lot last year because they were scoring so many touchdowns. So anyway, but let's hear, who are some other late round guys? Terrell Williams. Why not? I mean, shoot, 151 fantasy points. Maybe just take a super late round pick on him. We've got guys like Paris Campbell in the 15th, Randall Cobb in the 15th, Jacoby Myers in the 15th. New England, why not? Nelson Aguilar also another New England guy. So these are, when you get to this part of the draft, it's garbage time. You're just picking lottery tickets and stuff. Why not go for some secure value here? Grab yourself a couple of wide receivers that have the potential to maybe do something. I got no problem with that. Why not? I mean, shoot, who does New England have? They don't have anybody for wide receivers. So why not take a 15th round chance on either Jacoby or Nelson Aguilar? They might do something, Nelson Aguilar was actually a pretty nice surprise last year. Here's another bad one. Harris, the running back for New England, is also in this tier. Just awful. An awful choice as a 7th round pick. No, thank you. I absolutely don't want him. So let me know what you think about this. So how do you like these tiers? Do they make sense to you? And again, we're only looking at value. That's strictly what I'm looking at. Their projected points that they're going to score. I'm not looking at anything else about their situation. And so, there's some guys there that are in higher tiers that I'm like, I'll never take this guy. Maybe if he falls a colossal amount, but a guy like Galladay, I'm hands off. I'm not touching him. I'm especially not touching him in the 6th round, but no, 7th round, 8th round, 9th round, yeah, I'd take him. I'd take the risk. But right now, that's not where he's at. So leave him message down below. What do you think of this list? How helpful do you think these tiers are? And are you playing in the FFPC? I really want to know. I want to know, have you gotten your draft position yet? Have you tried any mock drafts? Where do you try your mock drafts for that? I primarily do the draft simulator on Fantasy Pros because I can adjust the settings enough to kind of show me where players are going and stuff. And so, it helps me with making my app more accurate and stuff like that because I can see players getting picked way earlier than they are on the draft board, things like that. But I like to hear. So thank you very much for watching. I know this was a long one today. We covered a lot of players, but I do appreciate it. Have yourself a great fantasy day, and I'll talk to you soon.